Yeah. So yes, is immigration impacting us? Yes, every single day, specifically since the new administration took over. But this is also mirroring when this same administration was in office in 2016. So because we have a high population of students who are international and have recently or in the last few years immigrated into our area, we are seeing and have seen in the past that there will be days or weeks where we just don't see kids. For example, last week I know ICE started in Chicago. They made their way swiftly to Charlotte, and so once there had been the first sightings, then we had multiple days this week missing a lot of kids. Just like per class, I have like currently on my roster, I have 6 classes. My largest class is 24 kids. But there are 4 classes in the gym at the same time of all a similar size. And we all had, 5, 6, 7. One of our teachers had 8 kids absent during one of their classes. So, and then when you look at demographics, they all are kids who would have been Hispanic, Latin American students. So the fear is real. Our students are, and their families are definitely dealing with that, especially because what we have found in Charlotte is the ICE tactics are to stake out Dollar Trees, Dollar Generals, and Walmart. And family members are going out to grab a necessity and not coming home again. And so the fear is very much real. And the other side of that is that I teach in a middle school. And so while we do have some great students with really high emotional IQ and social skills, we have a lot of what you would expect to happen in middle school. So we are also dealing with students threatening other students with, I'm going to call ICE on you, or questioning their legal status, being just kind of really gross. Thankfully, our administration is super supportive and is consequencing kids who are being just disgusting and unnecessary. And the district sent out language, like a big flyer of information of the legality of ICE raids and how they impact schools. And essentially, I think it's similar to everywhere else, that if they show up with a legitimate warrant, then they can be allowed to have whoever is on that warrant or whatever is on that warrant. But otherwise, our principal reiterated to us actually this week, because we had a staff meeting, I actually raised the question, I've seen that ICE is potentially using documentation that is not actually legal warrants. It just kind of looks sort of official, and then they're being granted too much access. Does the district have a plan for that? And he said, basically, his plan is that nobody enters the building. If they do enter the building, they can only talk to him. And he is not allowing anybody to do anything without him contacting and having reassurances from our schools, like our district's lawyer that is related to our school zone. And so I hope, and we didn't see this in 2016 either. We never saw ICE coming onto school properties. It has happened. Obviously, it's happened now, but it hasn't happened in Charlotte yet. So I just really hope that doesn't happen. As somebody who's worked with young kids for a long time, especially our immigrant students, they are already coming to us with incredible amounts of too much trauma, too much adult experiences at young ages from just, if you have to flee your country, you're doing so for a reason. And I have heard some incredible stories of what some of our students have gone through. So to then add to that they have finally found, safety and peace and calm for a minute to turn around. And now they're once again, living in fear of being hunted down and sent back to the place that they were terrified to exist in the first place. It's just all very daunting, to say the least.
Yeah. I thought about something when you were talking, we've talked about this in class too, right? Adding to the mental load of a student trying to learn, trying to come to a safe space, trying to feel like they belong to something, and then, having to worry about what's happening at home, even if it's not them, right? Having a parent who's undocumented. Are you seeing just like an increase in, I mean, middle schoolers are often a little unsettled anyway, but are you seeing an increase in sort of anxiety, mental health issues? Do your students have resources for that?
So yes and yes. So yes, the kids are anxious in general this year. We have
Mhm.
noticed specifically with our sixth graders, they are hyper anxious as a grade level. They ask so many questions across the grade level just all the time. It's almost, they're just grasping at any kind of information to help them have like safety and security in their brains.
Mhm.
Um, but yes, we as a school are actually super lucky. We have a counselor, like a grade level counselor for each grade. Plus we have a school social worker. Because we have a school that is a high need school and we have a lot going on in our school. And we have an on-site school psychologist who is not actually paid, like she's not a district employee. But she is funded by district funds, but she is our on-campus everyday school psychologist. So if our counselors or if our social worker think that a child will benefit from her services, then she refers her information to those students' parents. They can then choose to get involved with that or not. It's not, unfortunately, in the state anymore, up to the child's desires. It is up to the parents' desires. So we do have a lot of support. Here's our biggest gap on support, though. We don't have not a single one of our counselors, social worker, or our school psychologists are bilingual. So we can provide emotional support services for everybody except for our immigrant students who are not speaking English.
Yeah,
And
I was going to
we
ask
have,
about that. I was
yeah,
going to
we
ask
have
about the language
students.
barrier.
Yeah, and it's not just Spanish. Spanish is obviously our largest language gap, but we also have a handful of Ukrainian students and we have a handful of Syrian students, um, which creates a whole other level
Right.
of complication
Right.
when you just have like one or two kids. Now you're hoping there is a student in the student population that speaks the same language and speaks enough English that we can make some headway.
Yeah.
Our district has a partnership with a translating service, so you can call and schedule with a translator if you need to contact families, if you need to like do an on-site. We bring on-site translators in for anytime we have parent nights. But in terms of supporting our Spanish speaking students, we don't have enough bilingual staff or support staff in those roles that they would really benefit from. So then
Mhm.
what we see is that the three bilingual staff in the building are, it's like them standing in a hallway and like a little crew of humans just with them all the time because it's their safety net, right? And that's the one person that can be their safety net. And so I imagine the workload for those staff members is incredibly high because
Right.
they're dealing with their regular day-to-day workload. And then on top of that, they're having to be just like I am with my English speaking students, the full-time translator and the full-time emotional support for these kids. So it's a lot to say the least.
Yeah. I'm going to pause here really quick and just tell my students, remember to be at or around 11.2. We're looking at conflict theory, education, and equality. This is a great example of the hidden curriculum that is listed in our book. Um, okay, yes. So emotional intelligence, emotional need and support, while it's there, we're seeing another huge gap in mental health resources, which we also are talking about in this class, but then also in educational resources, right? When you have that language barrier and now you have another barrier, you have students scared to come to school or missing school for reasons outside of their control, whether they're political or not. You're seeing an addition to this educational gap.
Yes,
Um,
and I just would like to
yeah,
add that many of our students coming to us from Latin American countries are coming to us with what we would call missed education, so
oh yeah,
or gaps in their education,
yeah. Tell
education
us about that.
gaps. And so now we're dealing with a child who maybe hasn't even been in school, some of these kids, for the last 5 years. They didn't have access where they were, or everybody in the family had to do whatever it took just to survive. And so now you have a language barrier and an academic barrier that is, I am in seventh grade, but I am at a first grade reading level and I don't speak the common language in this room. And there's not enough adults who speak my language to even get me the foundational skills I need. So it's
Interesting.
normal.
So because your job sounds so simple, how as educators, I mean, how do you, your peers, your coworkers, people you've worked with for a long time, how do you guys differentiate instruction for students who are, that far behind, or there's a language barrier, or they're not getting appropriate services that they need? How do you guys handle that?
So I will speak for me. I don't know what everybody does in their individual classrooms.
Sure.
For myself, over the last however many years, and all the different iterations of being a teacher I've had as a social studies teacher, as a leadership and problem solving teacher, and now as a health and PE teacher. So like in PE, we just move our bodies, right? But in health, we do actual health assignments, written work, videos, etc. For me, I have always, since probably year 3 of teaching, once I had enough foundational skills for myself, and then once I also realized what the big gaps were, I started making tiered assignments. It effectively tripled my workload, but it made my in-class experience more accessible for more students, which led to greater student success overall.
Okay.
But so what that would look like would be making tiered lessons, not only based in English and Spanish, but for students of varying levels of skill, right? So if in social studies, we were talking about the colonization of Africa, and we were reading an article, I would make that article with a built-in text. It would have 3 different levels. One would include short paragraphs, underlined sentences, bolded words, and more simplified questions to attach to that. The middle level would be slightly larger paragraphs, slightly less, underlines, and a little bit higher level of question. And then the highest level of that would be my kids who were at or above grade level, large, chunky text, and more high order thinking questions. And then I would take that same article and I would translate it into Spanish. So I would potentially have 3 or 4 lessons happening in the same classroom at the same time, even though it was the same lesson, if that makes sense. That amount of work, though, is utterly exhausting and not sustainable, which is why I don't teach social studies anymore. Because I was doing that, and our student scores in social studies, not to toot my own horn, but our scores were excellent. And we were able to, in our 7th grade, grow every single child in the 7th grade. For my last 3 years with 7th grade, we grew every single child above the expected growth markers because of that work that we were doing together as a team. But to sustain that, you need so much more planning time. And the way that the system is built right now is dump more on teachers, give them less time to do it, and do not compensate them for the extra effort. Right. So like if I was a math or an ELA teacher, I would have been compensated for my growth scores. Because I had students growing above their expected growth, I would have received a bonus check at the end of the year. But because I was doing that in social studies, I did not. So then you have the issue of, okay, well, if my subject is deprioritized, then why am I going to kill myself for this? So now you're talking about that trickle down issue of really good educators. My best friend was a great social studies teacher who had this incredible ability to connect with students who, this is going to sound so bad, and I'm going to say it anyways. It's okay.
It's a safe space.
We call it a baggage whisperer because if a kid came in with really high needs, right? Like you can just tell in a school building, right? You can tell in a school building when a new student comes to school, and you can just tell when you can see it on their face, they need some support emotionally. Usually it's emotionally. And you can just see they look sad, or they look like they live in poverty, because we do have a lot of homeless students that come to our school. She had this ability to connect with these students in such a beautiful way. And she had to leave education because she's like, I'm killing myself to make no money. And I love these kids, but like I have to pay rent and feed myself. And so that's a massive issue that we're also dealing with across the country. It's like the best of us, the best educators across the country are not staying with it in public schools because there's no way to sustain the lifestyle unless you marry rich or like have rich family members that are willing to fund your life, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I don't mean to laugh. I think it's a really great way to break down, what we talk about when we talk about a teacher shortage, right? So we have bodies filling classrooms, but our veteran teachers, our best teachers, those teachers you're talking about, right? Like your friend who's able to connect with students, are very quick to leave because at the end of the day, that 30, 40, 50, even $60,000 you're making a year isn't going to cut it long term. So no, that's really, really helpful. I do kind of want to move on because what we prior to our new president, and my zero opinions on him, as my class knows. We in Charlotte, you guys had, you guys have enacted a lot of laws concerning LGBTQ students. You teach health. This has directly impacted you for longer than this administration has been in office. So I kind of want to walk it back to that. So just to start off, again, we don't know anything about North Carolina government policy, educational policy, but let's walk it back to sort of what are these laws? What is the state government telling you? What did it look like? What does it look like now? When did it shift?
Okay. If anybody in your class is interested, they could just start all the way back at the bathroom bill in North Carolina, which was many, many years ago. North Carolina as a state, we flip-flop back and forth in terms of our voting. We flip-flop back and forth. The last few years, we've seen an increase of people splitting their ticket, voting one way for major ticket items, and then voting. So I'll just be very blunt. This last voting cycle, we saw a lot of people voting a conservative presidential ticket and then a completely liberal rest of their ticket, which is just truly baffling to my brain. But because of this, depending on the county that you live in the state, your district and the way it functions is going to look very different than the larger, more liberal districts. Our state as a whole is incredibly gerrymandered. This has actually been an issue that was taken up by the courts because our state legislature legitimately will just redraw the lines to benefit their candidates. They just did it again. And because our state legislature and our state Supreme Court are also very conservative, they get away with it. And it's quite frustrating. So there is a supermajority in our state government of conservatives that have decided to make a war on public education, specifically around our LGBTQIA students. And so the year before last, what year was this?
Yes.
The start of my last school year. There we go. So not fall of 24, fall of 23. We went to our teacher work days in August, and there had been a lot of rumblings about something was coming from the state. The state does a lot over the summer, so we're always coming back with what do they have for us this year? And this fall of 23, we walked back into our teacher work days and were handed the Parents' Bill of Rights, which did literally nothing other than a lot of word salad of the same things that the parents already had rights to do, except that it guaranteed that teachers and schools have no way to protect our LGBTQ plus students. So there is a specific statement in the Parent Bill of Rights that says, it's two parts, that it directly affects my job as a health teacher. But if a child comes to me and says their name on my roster, let's say, is Susie Johns, okay? And Susie wants to go by Sam. I used to say, great, nice to meet you, Sam. Write their name on my roster and move on with my life. That Parent Bill of Rights now says I must notify the parent or I will be fired from my job. And so as a district, they basically said, okay, you're specifically targeting trans students or students who are in the process of discovering who they are, and you're going to make this very unsafe for them. So as a district, they then made a policy that we would notify every parent, no matter what the name was, which it makes sense, right? So like if Jacqueline wants to go by Jackie, right? There's like the common shortenings of name. Christopher goes by Chris. So then we just spent the last 2 years, I just sent an email, so many emails to parents about all these name changes. But in order to protect my students, which I have in the last few years had quite a few trans students or students who are just queer and just trying to figure it out, I then had to say to them, I know last year you were in my class in 7th grade PE, and I called you this name all year, but if you want me to continue to call you that name, I'm going to have to call home. And I already know, because we've had a beautiful relationship over the last year, that it's not safe to do that. So now I need to know what you want to do, because I want to honor who you are, but I also don't want to create a problem for you at home. And I can't do both, because if somehow I don't contact home and somebody finds out, then I get fired on the spot. And so I did have to have those hard conversations with those kids. And it was a lot of tears, obviously, because it's
Yeah.
like this is the South. It's
Right.
it's not safe. And some of our students have incredibly supportive families, and some of our students, I mean, like, for example, one of my students came up and gave me a hug during back to school night, and mom came up and said, "Oh my God, that she's never hugged me before."
Oh,
And I had to bite my tongue and be like, because you don't acknowledge who he is as
yeah.
a person,
Right.
right? Like, just be a mom, you know? And
Right.
so the other component of that Parents' Bill of Rights was that kids were automatically, in years past, kids were automatically opted into health instruction, like sex ed instruction.
Right.
And if a parent didn't want their child to participate, we sent home permission slips. And if they didn't want them to participate, they would like opt out.
Right.
Well, now it's the opposite. Every child is automatically opted out of health instruction, and parents have to opt them in. And so that looked like this year that I made 1,600 copies of an opt-in permission slip, because now you're expecting a squirrely 7th grader who has 40 billion things in their head to remember this little permission slip and get it signed and bring it back. And by the way, to have the wherewithal to understand the value of health instruction for the long haul, where they're like, oh, it's awkward to do that, so I don't want to do it, I'm not going to give it to my parent, so my big concern moving forward with that is the number of teen pregnancies I think we will see in the next 10 years,
Yeah.
because we had maybe 1/3 of our students receive health instruction this year.
Wow. So I, wow. That floors me. I didn't know that. You are the safe space, you are the teacher. However, I can't honor these things about you, these truths that you know to be true. Um, and again, as a middle schooler going through all of the hormonal and relational changes, I guess for you sitting in your seat, how has that affected you?
It's a lot. It's a lot to carry and to stress about, because I've seen this progression of kids and how they're growing up over the last 12, 13 years. And I simultaneously see so much like really cool stuff. For example, I just happened to be walking from the track with my class back to the gym 2 days ago, and very casually, these girls are in a different class. They're out at recess, and they're joking around with each other. Oh my God, you're totally flirting with her. Oh my God. And she's like, I am not flirting with her.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love so much that this generation is so willing and open with their feelings, with who they care about, with who they're attracted to. Like, we're seeing an increase in that, right?
Right.
And I love that so much. And simultaneously, I have this like overseer, lord of the state and the district and all this, that like limits how I can interact with these kids. And so whereas last year there was so much fear instilled in staff about this, that we've just played it super close to the chest. This year, I honestly just said, screw it. Like, if you're gonna fire me, fire me. I can't kowtow to stupid decisions made by hateful people that impact our most vulnerable students. So I'm just not gonna do it. And it's February, and I still have a job. So I'm hoping that,
Yeah, that was going to
fingers
be
crossed, I still have a job
my
next
other
year.
question. I was going to ask you, are you seeing more educators go rogue on this and just say, you know what, screw this policy, it's not for me. These kids are important. I'm gonna make sure that they know that they're valued and still loved.
I think that it probably depends on your admin.
Yeah.
And if you have a building that has an inclusive admin, then you probably can be more like that. And if you don't, then you probably are following more of, the standard rule that has been set for us. Thankfully, I think, while this is a new to our school administrator, I have cultivated enough of a relationship that I feel like he would have my back, I hope.
Mhm.
And if he does, honestly, truly, you guys, like, at the end of the day, I'm a huge integrity person. Like, you just do the right thing because it's the right thing. And just all I've ever been told my entire time in education by people above me in positions of power are like, we have to do what's best for kids. Great.
Mhm.
Well, you actively make decisions as a state, as a district, as a whatever, that are not best for kids, while, speaking out of the other side of your mouth that you're doing it in the best interest for kids. And so, I just have to say, at the end of the day, if it's really what's best for kids, then I'm going to do what's best for kids, as it aligns to my integrity and my values. Um, and this whole thing about, like, these public teachers are indoctrinated. If I could indoctrinate your child, I would literally just indoctrinate them to be nicer on a regular basis. Like, bring a pencil, stop wearing Crocs to gym, like, do less sprays of body spray in the locker room so I'm not gagging at your Bath and Body Works. Like, it's I'm not trying, like, there's this whole thing in this, like, in the public realm that is so anti-public schools and public school teachers, and they're all indoctrinators, and it's just not true. Like, I'm just trying to support middle school students during the three weirdest, most complicated years of their lives. Like, nobody thinks back about middle school and goes, yes, that was awesome. That was
No.
so great. I loved every second of that. Like,
Right.
I just need them to feel safe for 3 years and, like, know that it's gonna get better, and, like, please just keep going. Like, it's gonna be okay, and you're gonna find
Yeah.
your people, and you're gonna find your safety, and you're gonna, grow into whoever you are meant to be. And at the end of the day, the rest of this is, for the birds. I'd rather have no job than kowtow to the stupidity.